We continue from the previous episode as Dan Jucheon failed to make the divine relic recognize him as the master. He collapsed to his knees, gasping heavily, parts of his body encased in ice. His lips trembled as he muttered, "Impossible! How could this happen?" Suddenly, a shadow loomed over him. Jucheon looked up, gritting his teeth in shock. Yeo-Un stood before him. With ease, Cheon Yeo-Woon casually placed his hand on the golden staff. "Now that you've directly handled the divine relic, do you understand?" He swung the staff up, resting it effortlessly on his shoulder. His cold gaze pierced the kneeling Jucheon. "What I meant," Yeo-Un said icily, "when I said I can't give you the staff." From the hilltop, Morong Kang's voice shook with disbelief. How could this be? His expression darkened in dread. The worst-case scenario has occurred. First the dragon turtle's core, and now even this ancient divine relic has fallen into his hands. Dan Baekhyun's jaw clenched tight, cold sweat dripping down his back. To think, even those not of the palace master's bloodline could obtain the divine relic. His heart pounded as realization struck. From the very start, he gave us a chance, knowing we would fail. Could it be he used us just to convince all the palace members? Cheon Yeo-Woon strode past the defeated Jucheon, his voice transmission striking like a blade. "Thanks for providing such a good justification." Dan Jucheon's eyes widened, blood rushing to his head as he screamed in disbelief. "Just kill me instead." Slamming his palms to the ground, he sat cross-legged, his aura flaring violently. "I absolutely cannot acknowledge you." As Dan Jucheon gritted his teeth, blood spilling from his mouth, his followers dropped to their knees and shouted, "We will follow the acting palace master as well." Yeo-Un, gripping the staff tightly, asked coldly, "You can't acknowledge me, you say?" He swung the staff up, resting it effortlessly on his shoulder as rays of sunlight poured over him. "Would you believe it if I showed you directly?" With effortless ease, he raised the staff high. It erupted with a surge of ice chi, strong, yet perfectly stable. Dan Baekhyun clenched his teeth, thrusting his hand forward to block the overwhelming chill sweeping toward him, the elder with glasses shielding himself behind him. Even Dan Jucheon had to cover his face from the dazzling light radiating from the divine relic. The scene shifts, 2 weeks later. The ruins of the Ice Palace are alive with reconstruction. Dan Baekhyun stood atop a construction beam, overseeing the workers. "The reconstruction of the Ice Palace is going smoothly," he said firmly. An elder beside him reported, "There are still big and small puddles here and there, but all the water has drained, so there's no problem moving materials. It's all thanks to cult leader Cheon, our grand palace master." Their gazes lifted toward the massive ice pillar towering in the middle of the site. To think he could instantly freeze such a massive hole, one elder murmured in awe. Dan Baekhyun stared ahead, eyes narrowing. "The more I see it, the more amazing it is. Could I achieve such a feat if I diligently practiced the extreme cold ice heavenly art?" He turned slightly, asking, "Besides Master, is there anyone else capable of such power without being of the Ice Palace bloodline?" The elder beside him replied calmly, "He's not someone ordinary people can fathom." The elder with glasses added with respect, "Still, it's fortunate things have been resolved so smoothly thanks to him." "Palace Master." Dan Baekhyun nodded slowly. "Indeed. I even misunderstood until I finally knew the Master's true intentions. 2 weeks ago, Cheon Yeo-Woon created a spectacle before countless witnesses, leaving them utterly bewildered. Some members of the Ice Palace whispered in shock. Could this be it froze instantly? Then, as if moved by one will, all the Ice Palace members dropped to their knees. They bowed deeply, voices thundering in unison. "Master of the Divine Relic! Master of the Divine Relic!" Their chants echoed endlessly. Dan Baekhyun clenched his teeth, eyes shut tight, and thought bitterly. "At first, I thought we had lost everything, to the very man we asked for help. It seemed even worse than losing to Dan Jucheon, who was at least of our bloodline. But," Cheon Yeo-Woon's voice rang out across the place, "I will take young Palace Master Dan Baekhyun as my disciple and pass on the extreme cold ice heavenly art." He then declared with finality, "And I will step down as Grand Palace Master, passing the position of Palace Master to my disciple, Dan Baekhyun." Back to the present, Dan Baekhyun, sweating lightly, sank deep into thought. That might have been his goal from the very beginning. By becoming his disciple, I've essentially joined their cult. Still, we've secured autonomy for the North Sea Ice Palace. So it's not all bad. An elder beside him asked respectfully, "My lord, are there no teachings today?" Dan Baekhyun turned and replied calmly, "I heard he's interrogating that person today." The elder wearing a hat raised his hand, voice firm. "Wouldn't it be better to speak with the Grand Palace Master again and have him executed? Even if there's opposition from the elders and others, it's better to eliminate future troubles." The elder with glasses agreed with a heavy tone. "This old man thinks the same." Dan Baekhyun turned back fully, replying firmly, "If we execute him now, the backlash from his supporters and those under the elders will only grow." He looked ahead, deep in thought. "But I'm not sure. Keeping him alive is too dangerous. Wouldn't it be better to bear the opposition of some palace members and execute him?" His voice sank lower as he concluded, "Either way, all decisions will be made today." The scene shifts, an ice prison built inside the reconstruction camp. Dan Baekhyun's voice echoes. "The master said this will be the last interrogation." This was the Northern Sea Ice Palace, temporary detention cell. Inside, fists slammed repeatedly against the solid ice crystal walls. Bam! 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 Dan Ju-cheon, his knuckles torn and bleeding from recoil, panted heavily. Sweat rolled down his face as he glared at the unyielding ice. "No matter how hard I try, I can't melt it or break it. It's as hard as cold iron." His thoughts churned with frustration. The extreme cold ice heavenly technique is truly formidable. The ice-white divine palm could never create ice walls of this strength. Defeated, Ju-cheon staggered back into the tent, his body trembling with fatigue. He sat down heavily on a chair, eyes burning with unwillingness. Even if he was lucky enough to obtain the divine technique, I thought it would be impossible to master it properly. But to reach the 5th level of the extreme cold ice heavenly technique in such a short time. His face twisted in disbelief. Is he truly that strong of a master? Ju-cheon's fists clenched tightly. I considered the 5 strongest of the Central Plains, Bukjong and Yimik, to be a step above me. But this difference, it wasn't supposed to be this great. Dan Ju-cheon's lips curled bitterly as he muttered. There's no other way to describe him. But as a monster, he exhaled a heavy sigh, his eyes dim. Rather than being imprisoned like this, waiting for death, I regret not having a proper fight to the death. Suddenly, the flap of the tent shifted. Yeo-Un stepped inside. Dan Ju-cheon froze, sweat beading across his forehead as his eyes locked on him. Cheon Yeo-Woon walked in calmly, the divine relic resting behind his back, his very presence radiating a fierce and overwhelming aura without him even realizing it. Dan Ju-cheon's mind trembled. Although I can't be certain since my inner chi is sealed, it feels like I can't breathe, as if a scorching sun is bearing down on me. This pressure, it's completely different from 3 days ago. Could he have fully absorbed the core? With a mere wave of his hand, Yeo-Un released Ju-cheon's sealed acupoints from a distance. Ju-cheon's eyes widened slightly in surprise. Yeo-Un's expression remained sharp, his voice stern. "We've found the corpse of one Sang-oh, your follower, and the 6th elder of the Ice Palace, whose whereabouts were unknown. As you said, the suspicion regarding the missing dragon turtle head has been cleared." Dan Ju-cheon stayed silent, his thoughts clouded, unease flickering across his face. Yeo-Un's gaze narrowed. "I've unsealed your acupoints so you can speak. Why aren't you answering?" Dan Ju-cheon slowly lowered his head. His voice was low, but heavy. "I already told you. It wasn't me. It must have been them. Who stole the dragon turtle's head from your camp?" Yeo-Un shook his head, cold and firm. "No." Dan Ju-cheon lifted his gaze, amusement flickering in his eyes. Yeo-Un's voice cut through the heavy silence. "It wasn't the Murim Alliance either." Dan Ju-cheon frowned, confusion flashing in his eyes. "What do you mean? Didn't you say there were people missing from the Murim Alliance as well?" Yeo-Un's gaze remained cold as he explained. 2 days ago, about 50 li southeast from here, the corpses of the Black Shadow Brigade leaders were found, partially devoured by wild animals. Dan Ju-cheon's pupils contracted sharply. "What? Yeo-Un stepped closer, his tone unwavering, and there were traces of the extreme blade divine art on their bodies. Dan Jucheon's face went pale, sweat dripping down his temples. Are you saying those bastards stole it? Potala Palace, perched at an altitude of over 3,600 meters atop Mount Hongshan in Lhasa, known as the Second Putah Mountain, the sacred land of the Bodhisattva Guanyin. But now, the holy place was a ruin. The air reeked of blood and burning flesh. In the vast courtyard, the charred remains of over 1,000 corpses smoldered in the flames. A man wrapped in bandages stood at the center, his eyes scanning the scene with a detached calm. How nauseating. Something rolled out from the burning mound, skipping across the blackened stones before stopping at his feet. He bent down, picking it up between his fingers. A small, round object, glimmering faintly. The man with bandages examined it closely, his eyes narrowing. As expected of monks, they're producing an incredible amount of Sarira. His voice carried a twisted sense of admiration. I never thought I'd witness this with my own eyes in my lifetime. From behind, one of his subordinates spoke grimly. When we cremated the Dalai Lama, who died at the Blade Lord's hands, the amount of Sarira produced was equivalent to 10 men. The bandaged man flicked the bead lightly in his hand, watching it spin before catching it again. That alone proves how high his Buddhist nature was. His eyes darkened as he added coldly, yet even such a Dalai Lama couldn't withstand 3 moves from the Blade Lord. By the way, the bandaged man narrowed his eyes and asked coldly, it's already been 3 days since the Blade Lord entered the Dalai Lama's private training room in the White Palace. How long does it take to fully absorb that? A hawk circled above the burning ruins, screeching sharply before descending. It landed on the bandaged man's arm, its talons gripping tightly. He untied the small scroll fastened to its leg. The bird spread its wings and took off again, vanishing into the smoke-filled sky. Unfurling the message, the man's face hardened as his eyes darted across the words. His subordinate noticed and frowned. What's wrong? The bandaged man's pupils shrank. His breath quickened, and sweat trickled down his scarred cheek. He muttered in disbelief, voice trembling. The Annihilating Blade Squad and the Demonic Iron Squad were annihilated. One of the members of the Blade God's 6 martial clan hurrying towards the Dalai Lama's private training hall, the White Palace of Potala. He stops in front of the massive iron door and knocks several times. The door slowly creaks open as blue chi pours out from within. The man with bandages steps inside, waves of overwhelming chi sweeping past him. He thinks to himself, to think such a massive iron door could be opened with inner power alone. He wonders just how profound is his internal energy. Stepping forward, he clenches his trembling hand. The air, it's as cold as the winds of the North Sea. His eyes fix ahead. His presence alone is overwhelming. Looking around the vast hall, he recalls the great fish Kuan of the North Sea, said to have transformed after attaining spiritual power. Then, spotting a chained giant bird, he realizes one of the 5 spirits. The bird drips blood as its claws scrape against the floor, the cold air thick around it. Standing before the creature, he whispers, the Great Pung. A cold voice cuts through the silence. Unless it is something extraordinary, I told you not to disturb me. The man with bandages immediately drops to his knees. Leader, the Slaughter Unit, the Slaughter Blade Master, and even the Demon Iron Unit, all were sent to the North Sea Ice Palace. All have perished. The Blade God's aura bursts forth at the news. Without moving an inch, he uses telekinesis to lift his subordinate off the ground. With a swift motion, he drags him closer, gripping his neck tightly. The subordinate trembles in fear. The Blade God glares, teeth clenched. So in the end, you're telling me they failed? The man with bandages, strangled midair, trembled as he thought, the chilling energy pouring out of the leader's body. In just 2 days, he absorbed nearly all of the spiritual energy within the true core. Still suspended, he stammered with a trembling voice. The demon god has interfered in the affairs of the North Sea Ice Palace. The Blade God narrowed his eyes. The demon god. The man with bandages answered quickly. Yes, if not for him, we would have safely transported the dragon turtle's core. He added urgently. It seems that young whelp, the so-called Little Palace Lord of the North Sea Ice Palace, requested reinforcements from the demonic cult. Still, before the Slaughter Blade Master clashed with him, he managed to secure one of the dragon turtle's heads. With a swift motion, the Blade God hurled his subordinate aside. A loud crash shook the hall as debris scattered from the wall. The Blade God gritted his teeth, mumbling the demon god's name. He stared at the glowing core in his hand, thinking, could it be that he too is aiming for the five spirits? One of the three strange tomes, the true classic of the immortal white. A collection of 108 bizarre tales passed down since ancient times. The Linfeng Guiyong, mentioned in the Book of Rites among the five classics of Confucianism, speaks of the Qilin, the phoenix, the tortoise, and the dragon, the four spirits. But these have only ever existed as legends, with no proof of discovery. However, within the true classic of the immortal white, the five spirits are described in such detail as though the anonymous author had witnessed them firsthand. The first manifestations of the five spirits date back to the era of the three sovereigns and five emperors. And with each age's decline and the rise of another, new ones would appear. There were ferocious spiritual beasts, such as the fire Qilin or the dragon turtle, which slaughtered humans. Yet the five spirits devoted nearly their entire existence to cultivating spiritual power, striving toward the immortal realm. At the end of the Five Spirits chapter in the Immortal White Classic, a cryptic passage was written, dismissed by most with laughter. Yet there was one who took it seriously, shaking all of Zhongyuan itself. That was the first emperor of Qin, the first to unify the Central Plains. According to the records of Qin, which perished with the dynasty, his minister Su Fu led thousands of boys and girls across the land, fulfilling the emperor's wish by scouring every corner of the Central Plains. Su Fu vanished after heading west, and the emperor's ambitions seemed to die with him. Yet, some claim Su Fu truly did find the Great Pang, one of the five spirits. But believing that granting the wish of the emperor, by then a tyrant in his later years, would plunge the world into chaos, Su Fu disappeared, hiding the truth forever. The scene shifts back to the Dalai Lama's office. The Blade God releases an overwhelming surge of energy inside the hall. The man with bandages, barely able to stand, trembles in fear. I feel like I'm going to be crushed to death by this intense energy. At this rate, it wouldn't be strange if he killed me in a fit of rage. Sweat pours down his face. The Blade God's voice cuts through coldly. The fire Qilin of the Imperial Mausoleum, and now even the Dragon Turtle's core of the North Sea Ice Palace, have been stolen. The Blade God pulled 3 different maps from his sleeve, his voice cold and sharp. All these maps of the five spirits' locations, painstakingly gathered to prepare for the great plan. His anger exploded as he roared. This is all worthless now. He waved his hand, flames ignited, engulfing the maps. In moments, they burned to ash. The man with bandages widened his eyes in shock. Samadhi true fire. The Blade God's aura still surged violently as he turned away. I will grant you one final chance. While I finish absorbing the core, you will head to Changbai Mountain. The man repeated nervously. Changbai Mountain. The Blade God clenched his fist tightly, blue chi radiating from it. Then, the last true core of the five spirits. With a thunderous strike, he punched the ground. The floor shattered beneath them. His voice roared with conviction. It shall be mine. The man with bandages dropped to his knees from the aftershock. His eyes darted to the untouched ashes. The floor shattered, yet the maps remained unscathed. The clan leader's mastery of internal force has truly reached the highest realm. He forced himself to stand and asked carefully, "But clan leader, the entrance to Changbai Mountain is guarded by him. As you saw yourself, 20 years ago, his martial arts are." The Blade God loomed over him, cutting him off coldly. "Who told you to kill him?" The man froze, falling to his knees in confusion. "What?" The Blade God's eyes narrowed. The demon god has already claimed 2 of the five spirits' cores, which means he too is seeking eternal life. His voice deepened, which means he will inevitably head to Changbai Mountain as well. A chilling pause filled the hall. "Do you understand what I mean?" The man with bandages trembled, whispering, "The meaning of your words. Could it be?" The scene shifts to Cheon Yeo-Woon, holding the divine relic forward. With a sharp snap, the relic begins to unravel. Dan Jucheon's eyes widen in shock as it shifts. melting into liquid that wraps around Yeo-Woon's body. In moments, it molds into golden armor, flowing even across his back. Dan Jucheon's mouth hangs open in disbelief. Is this the hidden power of the divine artifact? Yeo-Un nods calmly. That's right. Dan Jucheon lowers his gaze, his mind reeling. Impossible. I thought it was mere coincidence that the demonic cult leader obtained the divine artifact, the profound cold ice staff, and that he became its master simply because he possessed it first. But neither the Baegong Chronicles nor any oral tradition ever spoke of a divine artifact breaking apart on its own to form armor. Could it be that not a single palace lord of the past had ever awakened the true power left behind by the first ancestor? He collapses to his knees, shaken. After all, I too believed its hidden power was merely the profound cold ice arts and the profound cold ice palm techniques engraved into the staff. Lowering his head, he whispers in despair, has he truly been chosen by the founder? Ancestor, have you truly chosen one who is not of your bloodline? Clenching his fists, his thoughts turn bitter. Or perhaps, ever since your descendants allowed your bloodline to be slain by outsiders, your spirit has abandoned us. And thus this calamity has come to pass. Are we merely reaping what we have sown? Yeo-Woon's cold voice cuts through his despair. If you insist on rejecting life until the very end, I shall behead you here and now. But before that, I will make you one final proposal. Dan Jucheon stared at Yeo-Un in silence. Yeo-Woon's glare sharpened as he declared, if you swear loyalty and follow me, I will grant you the seat of commander of the northern frontier. Dan Jucheon's eyes lit up, his thoughts racing. Commander of the northern frontier? The ruler of the entire northern lands? I would govern the martial world there. Yeo-Un unraveled the divine relic back to its original form. He extended it toward Dan Jucheon, who stiffened nervously before quickly reaching out with both hands. Clutching the staff, he waited. No rejection came. His body trembled with joy. The divine artifact no longer rejects me. A wide smile spread across his face. The demon god is igniting a fire within me. This man before me, he may well be the greatest existence the martial world has ever seen. If I could leave my name in the history he will create, would that not be the highest honor? Dan Jucheon dropped to his knees, hands clasped tightly. Yes, I shall rise once more at his side. He cried out boldly. I accept this opportunity granted by the demon god with eternal gratitude. Though unworthy, I beg you to accept my utmost loyalty. Yeo-Un, standing firm, spoke with confidence. I hereby appoint you commander of the northern frontier and the third great elder of our cult. Dan Jucheon replied without hesitation. Yes. And thus, another top-tier master, one of the 5 great experts levels, entered under Cheon Yeo-Woon's banner. And at this moment, for the first time, Cheon Yeo-Woon openly revealed his ambition for the unification of the martial world. He gazed at Dan Jucheon's grateful expression and thought silently. As expected, it's fine even when Dan Jucheon is holding it. The scene shifts. 2 weeks ago, after escaping the cave, inside the heavenly demonic cult leader's temporary tent, Yeo-Un sits in deep meditation, cross-legged. Before him rests the extreme cold ice staff. In silence, he reflects. Thanks to the 9-1 meridian blockage, I was able to master the extreme cold ice heaven technique without obstacles. But the power of this divine artifact doesn't end there. I can faintly sense an ancient power residing within the ice staff. His eyes widened. What exactly is the identity of this power? Suddenly, a golden glow emits from the extreme cold ice staff, growing brighter and brighter. In the next instant, Yeo-Un's consciousness is pulled inside the staff. The sensation overwhelms him, a chilling déjà vu. This feeling, it's just like when I obtained the heavenly demon sword. Yeo-Un was pulled into the consciousness stored within the extreme cold ice staff. He glanced around, wondering where he was, when orange feathers began to fall from above. Suddenly, someone dashed past him with incredible speed, a gust of wind sweeping by. Using swift footwork, the figure moved around, fighting a giant bird. Yeo-Un's eyes widened, his mouth opening in awe. This can't be. A man in white fur clothes is subduing that giant bird with unparalleled martial arts. I see. These are memories remaining in the extreme cold ice staff. The man landed on the giant bird's back with a loud bang. The beast screeched in pain. He raised a golden staff, identical in form, and muttered, "The heart should be around here." With all his might, he stabbed the bird's heart using the extreme cold ice staff. The staff erupted with cold chi, freezing the massive creature from within. Yeo-Un, still in deep meditation, realized, this is the true power hidden in the divine artifact, the spiritual energy of the great rock. He also noticed, although much of it was lost after being neglected for hundreds of years, channeling his chi fiercely, two different auras erupted from his body as he absorbed the staff's energy. It's now harmonizing with the energy of the 9-yin meridian blockage, the same cold energy, becoming spiritual energy nearly equivalent to a complete core. With pride, he declared, "It seems I've now fully absorbed the spiritual energy of the divine artifact." But just then, the extreme cold ice staff began to unravel, melting into liquid form. Before it wrapped around Yeo-Un's body, changing into armor, Yeo-Un was amused as he wondered, the extreme cold ice staff is transforming like the heavenly demon sword? He tapped the armor on his chest and said, "Nano, analyze the material." The Nano system responded, analyzing the material of the corresponding metal as per user's command. Then it notified, the golden staff is made of the same metal as the heavenly demonic sword. It is a substance that doesn't exist on Earth. Yeo-Un took out his heavenly demonic sword, examining it silently. They said the extreme cold ice staff was made by mixing fragments of a meteorite that fell in Yunnan. He held both weapons together, studying them carefully. The method of transformation is the same as the heavenly demonic sword. Then the heavenly demonic sword might also contain meteorite fragments. To think that two such weapons have come into my possession. Is this merely a coincidence? The scene shifts back to Yeo-Un as he thought. In any case, thanks to absorbing the great rock's spiritual energy, others can now touch the divine artifact. I've erased the incantations engraved on the surface. Yeo-Un smiled slightly as he glanced at Dan Jucheon's delighted expression and thought, since I have the Nano suit, the armor is meaningless to me. If I can gain this much talent with just an empty shell of a divine artifact, it's not a bad deal. The scene then shifts once more. North Sea Ice Palace Temporary Infirmary. There, the previous cult leader, Cheon Yeo-Woon, lay resting. Hyo-Bong and the Grand Guardian stood at his side. Cheon Yeo-Woon breathed heavily, his condition dire. Hyo-Bong asked with concern. Even with the cult leader and Grand Guardian infusing energy, there's no sign of him waking up. Hyo-Bong then turned toward the Grand Guardian and said, I think we should hurry and take him back to the main cult. The Grand Guardian immediately nodded. He was deep in thought as he pondered. The current cult leader said it might be a side effect of the worm and hypnosis in his mind. Even the former Grand Cult leader suffered damage to his core meridians from the side effects of the demonic blood reversal technique and hypnosis alone, and it took several months for him to recover. Having been under hypnosis for an even longer time, there's no telling when he'll wake up. You were the first cult leader I served. Many things have changed during your absence. He then recalled Yeo-Un's actions and said, Our cult, which once trembled before the 6 major sects, even the 6-blade martial school, which you and the Sword Demon group once considered dangerous, now fears the current cult leader. Suddenly, Cheon Yeo-Woon began coughing violently, leaving Hyo-Bong and the Grand Guardian shocked. The Grand Guardian rushed forward, trying to steady him. Then he turned sharply to Hyo-Bong and shouted, Adjutant Hyo, bring the cult leader here immediately. Hyo-Bong spun around and dashed out. All right, I'll go right away. Cheon Yeo-Woon sat up straight, coughing even more violently as he covered his mouth with his hand. The Grand Guardian knelt beside him, concern in his voice. Cult leader, are you all right? Cheon Yeo-Woon, with a faint smile, glanced at the Grand Guardian and asked, Has it been 20 years? He placed his hand on the Grand Guardian's shoulder and said, I never thought I'd see you alive like this. The Grand Guardian trembled slightly, his voice filled with emotion as he called out, Cult leader. Cheon Yeo-Woon began to cough violently once more, blood spilling from his mouth. The Grand Guardian remained deeply worried. Cheon Yeo-Woon said casually, I'm fine. It's not an internal injury. But suddenly, blood trickled from his nose as sweat poured down his face. The Grand Guardian's eyes widened in shock. Even a nosable. He seems to be in a dangerous condition. Cheon Yeo-Woon let out a soft sigh as he tried to gather his chi. He sat in a lotus position as golden energy began flowing around his body, converging into his dantian. He continued meditating, focusing deeply. Suddenly, a golden lotus appeared beneath him, its aura spreading across the room. The Grand Guardian was stunned. Golden energy? Could this be the supreme mental technique that only the abbot of Shaolin Temple can master? The muscle change classic? It should be a completely different energy circulation method from the heavenly demonic mental technique. How? It was said that the muscle change classic, created by Bodhidharma, the founder of Shaolin, is the pinnacle of orthodox internal martial arts. It strengthens the body's power and contains the essence of Buddhism. However, it can conflict with the internal energy cultivated through the heavenly demonic cultivation technique, recreated by the sword demon. To learn it, one must give up their existing true energy. The Grand Guardian realized in awe. As he circulates the muscle change classic, the cult leader's complexion is brightening. At that moment, Yeo-Un entered the room in a hurry. Grand Guardian, what's happening? The Grand Guardian turned sharply. Cult leader. Suddenly, Cheon Yeo-Woon's expression shifted to one of shock as fresh sweat rolled down his face. He then turned to look at Yeo-Un. Yeo-Un, glancing back at him, pondered silently. Although his vitality is damaged, he has still reached the enlightened realm. Cheon Yeo-Woon was also deep in thought. I thought I could gauge the other's strength in most cases, but I can't even fathom the power of this young man who's barely past his coming of age. Cheon Yeo-Woon then asked, "Who? You are?" Yeo-Un immediately bowed slightly and introduced himself. "I'm your grandson, Cheon Yeo-Woon," greets the former grand cult leader. Cheon Yeo-Woon was stunned. "Cheon Yeo-Woon." Then he wondered aloud. "Then you're Yeo-Un's child?" Memories stirred as he recalled. "There's no way I wouldn't know the name Yeo-Un." When Yeo-Jong said he would marry a maid from the cult leader selection, the 6 major factions raised objections. I was startled and personally mediated the situation. And before I left the cult, he was the only child Yeo-Jong ever asked me to name. The Grand Guardian confirmed. "He's the current cult leader, former grand cult leader, sir." Cheon Yeo-Woon was in utter disbelief. "The current cult leader? Is that true?" He glanced at Yeo-Un, still clasping his hands, and pondered silently. "Until I went to confront the 6-blade martial school myself," Yeo-Jong's reign continued. "I naturally thought he would still be the cult leader. To think a child not from the 6 major factions became the cult leader. I can't believe it. I even thought he wouldn't survive because of them. To break free from their seemingly eternal shackles. It's truly a miracle." Cheon Yeo-Woon then smiled brightly, stretching out his hand. "For you to become the cult leader, I'm truly amazed. Could you come closer?" He held out his hand toward Yeo-Un in silence. Yeo-Un placed his own hand atop Cheon Yeo-Woon's. Cheon Yeo-Woon said softly, "When I first saw you, your hands were like little ferns. To think you've grown so well." He smiled warmly and added, "You truly resemble your mother." Yeo-Un's emotions stirred as he wondered, "What is this? This warm emotion rising in my chest?" His eyes reddened slightly. "Is this what they call the bond of blood?" Cheon Yeo-Woon, smiling gently, said, "I'm so glad that you're all right." Yeo-Un, still holding his hand, recalled softly, "Grandfather," as Yeo-Un said, "I'm truly relieved that you're safe, grandfather." Cheon Yeo-Woon smiled gently, laughing softly. "It feels good to be called grandfather by my grandchild." Yeo-Un looked at him with warmth, his heart heavy with emotion. "He's different from the former grand cult leader. I thought such emotions were impossible to feel without having a child." Hyo-Bong's eyes grew moist as he watched the two finally reunited. Suddenly, Cheon Yeo-Woon's eyes widened as if recalling something important. He tried to rise in a rush and urgently asked the Grand Guardian, "Where is this place?" The Grand Guardian bowed and said calmly, "Please, Sir, calm yourself. This is the Northern Sea Ice Palace." Cheon Yeo-Woon looked around, his expression grim. "The Northern Sea Ice Palace?" Then, in the next moment, he stood up, clutching Yeo-Woon's robe. His voice trembled. "Why, Yeo-Woon? We must stop them immediately." Yeo-Woon tried to steady him, but Cheon Niji's voice shook with urgency. "We can't let the dragon turtle's core fall into their hands." His body quivered as he pleaded, "There's no time. If they gather all the true cores of the 5 spirits..." Yeo-Woon gently sat his grandfather back down. "You don't need to worry. The core didn't fall into their hands." Cheon Niji froze, stunned. "What? It didn't?" Yeo-Woon slowly opened his palm, conjuring a glowing, round energy radiating with lightning chi. "The dragon turtle's core. I took it." Cheon Niji's eyes widened in awe, disbelief filling his voice. You really obtained it." Yeo-Woon crushed the energy sphere in his palm, then spoke firmly to his grandfather. "Your health hasn't fully recovered, so it's difficult to ask. But how did you end up captured by the 6-blade martial school and fall under hypnosis?" Cheon Niji lowered his head, trembling with shame. "At that time, I believed it would protect our cult and the peace of the martial world." His voice cracked. "But because of my mistake, Grandmaster Ji-young and others also became sacrifices." The Grand Guardian, listening at the side, froze in shock. Grandmaster Ji-young, the former abbot of Shaolin Temple who disappeared 18 years ago. He recalled another detail. Come to think of it, Morong Yun of the Morong family said he was among the masked masters. Cheon Niji then looked straight at Yeo-Un. "Why, Yeo-Un? It's far too early to feel relieved just because you obtained the dragon turtle's core." He continued solemnly. "Besides the dragon turtle, there are 4 other spirit beasts, the Imugi, the flame Chelan, the great rock, and the white wind tiger. 5 spirit beasts in total." He explained further. "The 6-blade martial school will surely target the cores of the remaining spirits." Yeo-Un cut in. "I was already somewhat aware of that." He raised his palm, conjuring a blazing sphere of fire chi. "I stopped them from obtaining the flame Chelan's core." At the Imperial Tomb, Cheon Niji's eyes widened in shock at his grandson's feat. Yeo-Un then recalled the intruders who once infiltrated the cult. He placed his hand on his chin. "Come to think of it, they once planted a spy in our cult to target the Demon Blade Hall. That may have been to go after the Imugi's core." Sweat trickled down Cheon Niji's forehead as he whispered, "Imugi? Demon Blade Hall? What is that?" Without another word, Yeo-Un drew forth the heavenly demon sword before his grandfather. Cheon Niji's eyes widened in shock as he stared at the blade, wondering what it could be. Yeo-Un explained firmly, "It's the true heavenly demonic sword, containing the spiritual power of the Imugi's core." Cheon Niji's breath caught. He shouted unconsciously, "The heavenly demonic sword." His thoughts raced wildly. It was said, only the true successor of the heavenly demon could wield it, and Yeo-Un has obtained it. Yeo-Un then retracted the sword. Cheon Niji asked in disbelief, "Then you've obtained not just the dragon turtle and flame Chelan's cores, but the Imugi's core as well?" Yeo-Un nodded calmly. "That's correct." Cheon Niji staggered, nearly losing balance before the Grand Guardian caught him. His lips trembled. "How could this be?" Yeo-Un scratched the back of his head, thinking to himself, "Should I not mention the Great Rock?" Cheon Niji steadied himself and drew in a deep breath. His expression softened. "Now that I've calmed down a bit, I should greet you properly." Suddenly, he knelt on one knee. Hyo Bong and the Grand Guardian gasped in shock at his action. Cheon Niji smiled gently, his voice filled with reverence. "I, Cheon Niji, the 22nd cult leader of the great heavenly demonic cult, pay my respects to the 2nd heavenly demon." Yeo-Un immediately bowed slightly, flustered. "Please rise, grandfather. You're making me uncomfortable." Cheon Niji laughed softly. How could this be uncomfortable? Tears of joy welled in his eyes. The happiest day of this old man's life has finally arrived. Yeo-Un gently sat his grandfather back on the bed, his thoughts heavy. Grandfather is truly a devoted cult member, one who carried every burden, even at the cost of his own life. He added silently, "If the leaders of the 6 major factions had been like this, our cult would never have fallen into civil war." Cheon Niji stared straight into Yeo-Un's eyes and said firmly, "You obtained the true heavenly demonic sword, and seizing the cores ahead of the 6-blade martial school." He paused, his tone heavy. Perhaps all of this might be the guidance of the heavenly demon ancestor. Yeo-Un lowered his gaze, lost in thought. The ancestor's guidance. He recalled the moment he first obtained the heavenly demonic sword. Back then, the ancestor's voice had spoken to him. It will take quite a while to absorb all the energy. I might not be right. Cheon Yeo-Woon stroked his chin in thought, his voice quiet but steady. This might just be the wishful thinking of a mere cult member. He then added with conviction, but my intuition tells me. The time has come. The time to reveal everything has arrived. He leaned forward, continuing. As you said, if that much time has passed, it would be about 25 years ago. His voice grew heavier with memory. The demonic cult I led back then was expanding westward, into the strongholds of the evil sects. Cheon Yeo-Woon's gaze hardened as he recalled. The leader of the evil faction alliance at that time was Yeo-Un, the Destruction Emperor. He had risen to become one of the 5 great masters after defeating Manhwa, the great death king of the previous generation. His tone turned sharp. Our cult's overwhelming forces were able to drive the evil sects back, all the way to Yunnan province. Yeo-Un and the others listened intently. Cheon Yeo-Woon continued solemnly. It was an unstoppable momentum. But the 6 major factions grew restless. They were dissatisfied with our relentless westward advance. The Grand Guardian's eyes narrowed as he recalled. I remember. He paused, his tone grave. Everyone was puzzled back then. Why you focused on subjugating the West? He added, when in truth, our cult possessed the power to dream of conquering the Central Plains by heading north to face the righteous Martial Alliance. Cheon Yeo-Woon closed his eyes, voice low and steady. I'm saying this now, but at that time I had no choice. I made a pact with him. I first met him about 50 years ago. Memories gathered at the edges of his voice as he spoke. In my youthful, passionate years, like the cult leaders before me, I tried to advance north, into the heart of the Central Plains martial world. The one who stopped me then was the abbot of Shaolin Temple, Grand Master Yeo-Un. He paused, remembering the man. Back then he was called the Buddha Saint, a respected figure in the Central Plains, not famed for overwhelming prowess. Yet when I fought him for nearly half a day, I realized how many extraordinary individuals in the martial world remain hidden. Cheon Yeo-Woon's face tightened. I suffered severe internal injuries and was defeated. It was my first true defeat. I burned for revenge, so we made a pact. Meet and duel every 5 years. Ba, benefactor Cheon. If you bring your forces each time, countless will die. Let us settle this one-on-one at a predetermined place. A hint of shame touched his voice. That began our long rivalry, and for 20 years, shamefully, I never once defeated Grand Master Yeo-Un. The scene tightens. The monk's staff spins through the air, a whirl of motion. Cheon Yeo-Woon's tone brightened with remembered victory. When our duel came for the 5th time, I finally won. A victory I had waited for so long. He let the silence sit for a moment, then finished quietly. And by our pact, I could have advanced north. Cheon Yeo-Woon's voice grew heavier. But I couldn't do that. 25 years was enough time. Enough to understand, to respect each other. On the day I finally defeated the Grand Master, we became as close as friends. He exhaled slowly. After that, I abandoned the idea of advancing north, and instead turned my gaze westward. To the Orthodox faction, he was their great hero. But only the 2 of us knew the truth. When I was weighed down by politics, when worries clouded my heart, I would meet him. That man of deep Buddhist faith, a true Buddhist. His tone darkened. Then, that incident occurred. As usual, I went to our meeting place. But that day, Grand Master Yeo-Un did not appear. Even after 2 weeks, he never came. Cheon Yeo-Woon's brow furrowed. Around that time, I heard from the Shadow Clan that Zen Master Yeo-Un, one of Shaolin's 10 Dharma Masters, had gone missing. And that Grand Master Yeo-Un had gone personally to Mount Byam in the southeast of Anhui province. His hands tightened slightly as he remembered. Though it was not my place to interfere in another sect's matters, curiosity overtook me. I went to Mount Byam alone. After all, it was not far from our cult's territory. His voice dropped, haunted. There, in the deep forest, I found the remnants of battle. Traces of Shaolin's 72 fist arts, the technique of Zen Master Juom. And the other? He hesitated, eyes narrowing. The other bore no resemblance to any martial arts of this world. They matched the sword traces I had once seen in the Demon Blade Hall during the 6th stage test. His tone sharpened. The very same sword traces left by the Blade God, whom our 7th cult leader, the Sword Demon Gong, once faced. Yeo-Woon's eyes sharpened. The Blade God's divine martial art, the technique of the 6th Blade Martial School. Cheon Yeo-Woon gave a faint, amused smile. You even know its name? At the time I passed the test, I thought it was nothing more than an old tale from hundreds of years ago, so I ignored the dying words of Sword Demon Gong that I once heard from the Guardian. But after seeing that technique reappear in the world, I knew. This incident was no ordinary matter. His tone grew grim as he continued. After 2 days of tracking, I found Grand Master Yeo-Un. He was fighting desperately in a ravine in western Zhejiang province, surrounded by many masters. I joined forces with him. Though we were delayed by several, in the end, we defeated them all. Cheon Yeo-Woon's gaze hardened. They wielded all kinds of weapons, even palm techniques. But at the core, every move was rooted in the Blade God's martial arts. He recalled Yeo-Un's words. That man turned to me and said, "Benefactor Cheon, we must not kill them all." Cheon Yeo-Woon nodded slowly as he explained. I didn't know why, but at his insistence, we captured some alive. Later, as we stood together, I asked him, "My friend, these techniques they used, just who are they?" His voice deepened, and Grand Master Yeo-Un answered me. "Benefactor Cheon, these are the descendants of the Blade God." Cheon Yeo-Woon's eyes widened even in the memory. The Blade God. I had suspected as much, but to hear it confirmed was still shocking. The descendants of the world's greatest swordsman, who vanished long ago, had returned. Cheon Yeo-Woon paused for a moment, his tone heavy. At first, I thought Grand Master Yeo-Un had been drawn into all this while searching for the missing Zen Master Juom. But that wasn't it. Yeo-Woon's eyes widened in shock. If that's not it then? Cheon Yeo-Woon's expression darkened. Grand Master Yeo-Un. He already knew of their existence. His voice sank, carrying weight with every word. He knew, from a very long time ago. 500 years ago, a figure known as the Blade God first appeared in the martial world. His first victim was Cheon Yeo-Woon, the 7th cult leader of the heavenly demonic cult, one of the 5 great masters of that age. 2 years later, the Blade God struck again, this time at Mount Song. Divine monk Shadlin, also one of the 5 great masters, was slain. As Shadlin was revered across the Central Plains, the 9 sects and 1 faction joined forces with countless smaller sects to pursue the killer, yet they all failed. 2 years after that, the evil faction's giant, the Iron Fist King Yukjong Jiam, was cut down. And 2 years later still, the number 1 swordsman of the Wudong sect, Immortal Qing Mian, fell beneath his blade. At that time, the only one who could halt that man's path of slaughter was our cult's unparalleled swordsman, the Sword Demon. Cheon Yeo-Woon's voice grew solemn as he finished recounting the tale. He lowered his head, letting out a quiet sigh. Yeo-Un, I should tell you the true reason the Sword Demon founded the Demonic Academy. It is time you knew. Yeo-Un, standing tall before him, answered without hesitation. It was to prepare for the Blade God, and for his descendants who would one day return. Cheon Yeo-Woon's eyes widened in shock. How do you know this? The Grand Guardian leaned in, his voice steady. The cult leader himself followed the Elder's path. He passed the 6th stage of the Demonic Academy. He has already learned of the Sword Demon's last wishes and secret notes. Cheon Yeo-Woon was stunned. What? You passed the 6th stage test. He sighed again, then let out a rough laugh. You never stop surprising this old man. But then, with talent like yours, it would be strange if you hadn't passed. Cheon Yeo-Woon's expression darkened as he continued, his voice low and heavy. Our cult was not the only one that made preparations. The words left Yeo-Un unsettled, his brows furrowing slightly. Clutching the edge of the bed with trembling fingers, Cheon Yeo-Woon went on. When the 2 giants of the righteous path, the Shaolin divine monk and the Wudong swordsman, were slain, the righteous factions formed a secret organization to pursue that man. He paused, then spoke the name with deliberate weight. The Forest of Hermits. The Grand Guardian stiffened, his eyes widening at the revelation. Cheon Yeo-Woon added, That was the very organization Grandmaster Guiding once belonged to. Yeo-Un, listening intently, fell into deep thought. The Forest of Hermits, a force said to appear only when great bloodshed descends upon the martial world. But for 5 centuries, not a single trace of them appeared. Everyone believed it was nothing more than a rumor. Cheon Yeo-Woon let out another weary sigh. No, they are real. The Forest of Hermits exists. Grandmaster Gujung himself was a member. Considering most of the 5 great masters were slain by that person, it was only natural that the righteous factions grew wary 500 years ago. He shook his head, but their path was different from ours. Unlike the Sword Demon, who dedicated himself to raising martial artists to one day confront the Blade God, the Forest of Hermits devoted themselves to secretly tracking him. The greatest problem was that the Blade God left no trace behind. Even so, the Forest of Hermits never stopped. While others abandoned the hunt, they pursued him relentlessly, just as the Sword Demon foresaw when he prepared for a distant future. Cheon Yeo-Woon's voice fell to a hush, and his prediction proved true. 200 years after the Blade God's disappearance, faint traces of a blade technique believed to be his were discovered on Mount Baiyang in Jiangsu province. Cheon Yeo-Woon's voice grew heavier, pressing like a stone on the room. But there was something strange about those blade marks. He tightened his grip on the blanket. They were far less refined than the traces found on the corpses of the masters slain by the Blade God. Records concluded they were nothing more than imitations of his martial arts. After the traces on Mount Baiyang, nothing more was discovered. But about 50 years later, another sign appeared. This time, in the northern reaches of Jiangxi province. The blade marks there were far more advanced than those discovered at Mount Baiyang, though still far inferior to the Blade God's own technique. Yeo-Un, unable to suppress his curiosity, leaned forward. Then, did the Forest of Hermits encounter them at that time? Cheon Yeo-Woon shook his head. No. Despite centuries of secretive pursuit, the Forest of Hermits never uncovered the true wielder. They left behind nothing more than a few blade marks, remnants of martial techniques, never a shadow of their forms. He then locked eyes with Yeo-Un, his gaze sharp and unwavering. From the moment the Forest of Hermits was founded until now, they unearthed countless traces of the Blade God's techniques, but the wielders themselves never revealed their presence. Cheon Yeo-Woon's voice lowered, deep with meaning. Yet, there was one fact discovered from all those traces. Yeo-Un arched his brow. One fact. Cheon Yeo-Woon's expression hardened. Their blade marks grew closer and closer. Over time, they became nearly identical to those left by the Blade God himself. Both Hyo-Bong and the Grand Guardian stiffened, stunned by the revelation. Cheon Yeo-Woon, his tone grim, continued. Based on this, the Forest of Hermits formed a chilling hypothesis. These people were indeed descendants of the Blade God, but they might not have directly received his teachings. Yeo-Un placed his hand against his chin, eyes clouded with thought. That is a reasonable hypothesis. If they weren't formally taught, or if the training method for the Blade God's divine martial art had been lost, then perhaps, over centuries, they slowly recreated it. But what truly mattered was this: the descendants of the Blade God existed. Cheon Yeo-Woon continued, voice tightening. In time, those descendants realized the Forest of Hermits was tracking them. They revealed themselves, but only to hunt down the trackers. His fists clenched against his knees, veins standing out. By the time this truth was uncovered, more than 3 masters of the Forest of Hermits had already vanished. So Dharma Master Juom of Shaolin, himself a member of the Forest of Hermits, volunteered to act as bait, to turn the hunt back upon them. He exhaled deeply, then pressed his palms together, closing his eyes as though in prayer. It was through Dharma Master Juom's offering of his life that we first encountered them. Later, Grandmaster Gujung and I succeeded in capturing some of the Blade God's descendants. But before we could interrogate them, their heads burst apart. Every single time, we failed to obtain a shred of information. He swallowed hard, voice dropping lower. Then, 20 years ago, a figure appeared, an enemy of overwhelming martial prowess. He came leading others, men hidden behind iron masks. Cheon Yeo-Woon's gaze turned distant, as though reliving that battle. One of them spoke, their voice cold, saying, "Enjoy the reunion with your comrades." At first, I could not grasp his meaning, Cheon Yeo-Woon admitted. But after a battle more fierce than any before, we lost the master of the six-blade martial school, though we managed to capture those wearing the iron masks. And only when we removed their masks did we understand the words he spoke. The enemy within those masks was none other than Dharma Master Yeo-Un, the very man who had once sacrificed himself as bait. Cheon Yeo-Woon's voice grew heavier as he continued. There were others as well, masters of the forest of hermits whom we believed dead. Yet they hadn't perished, they had been placed under hypnosis. No matter what method we tried to break that hypnosis, the result was always the same. The bugs inside their heads would explode, killing them instantly. He paused, his gaze sinking into the past. But Dharma Master Yeo-Un was different. The hypnosis on him was only partially broken. He told us that the six-blade martial school had gathered immense strength, enough to stand against the entire martial arts world. But he exhaled sharply. He was already fatally wounded during the battle. He couldn't endure long, and in the end, he died. Cheon Yeo-Woon went on. His head did not explode. Wanting to know why, I asked Grandmaster Gujung for permission to cut open his skull. And what I discovered shocked me. The bug within his head was dormant, as though it had entered hibernation. What suppressed its activity must have been the sacred Buddhist power of the Muscle Change Classic. At that, Yeo-Un suddenly cut in, his voice sharp with realization. Grandfather, don't tell me. The reason you learned the Muscle Change Classic was... Cheon Yeo-Woon slowly nodded, his expression solemn, eyes locked on Yeo-Un. Yes, it was to infiltrate their stronghold. Then, with unwavering boldness, he declared, this old man was also a member of the Forest of Hermits. Yeo-Un froze, stunned into silence. His fists clenched so tightly they trembled, disbelief and turmoil surging inside him. Cheon Yeo-Woon's voice grew steady. The Muscle Change Classic, created by Bodhidharma of Shaolin, is considered the pinnacle of cultivation techniques. Its greatest strength lies in calming both mind and body. He paused before continuing, his tone grave. After realizing that the Muscle Change Classic could suppress hypnosis and restrain the bugs, Grandmaster Gujung and I conceived a plan to use it as a means to infiltrate the six-blade martial school from within. The Grand Guardian, who had been listening intently at his side, finally spoke up, his voice heavy with dawning realization. Was that the reason you went into seclusion back then? To learn the Muscle Change Classic? Cheon Yeo-Woon glanced at him, nodding slightly. That was part of the reason, but there was more. I also sought to restore the energy circulation method of the heavenly demonic sword art. I believe that only the heavenly demonic sword art could counter the blade god's divine martial art. But without its energy circulation method, I could never fully unfold its true sword techniques. That is why I devoted so much time to restoring it. A shadow crossed his face as he added, my plan was to remain within the cult until I mastered the Muscle Change Classic. But the more I practiced it, the stronger the Buddhist energy within me grew, overshadowing the true energy of our heavenly demonic cultivation. He lowered his gaze, voice tinged with resignation. If the six elders, or Cheon Yeo-Woon, who had inherited the cult leader's position, were to notice, everything would be ruined. So I was forced to leave the cult earlier than planned. Drawing in a quiet breath, he concluded, after years of preparation, I finally set my plan in motion. I allowed myself to be captured, and from there, I infiltrated the very snake's mouth. The Grand Guardian's body trembled as he listened, overwhelmed with grief and respect. Unable to contain himself, he fell to his knees, bowing low before Cheon Yeo-Woon. His voice shook as he choked out. How could you bear such a burden alone? If only you had told your subordinates. Cheon Yeo-Woon gently placed his hand on the Grand Guardian's trembling shoulder, his voice low yet firm. Don't you also bear the mission as the guardian of the heavenly demon seal, and the will left behind by the sword demon? How could this old man ever overlook such a duty? Hyo-Bong and the Grand Guardian both grew emotional, their voices breaking as they called out the elder's name. Yeo-Un stood silently to the side, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. His thoughts churned like a storm. So, grandfather wasn't captured in battle, he willingly went in. Grandfather. Cheon Yeo-Woon closed his eyes briefly, gathering himself before continuing, his tone slow and heavy. After being captured by them, I awoke in what was presumed to be the stronghold of the Six-Blade Martial School. At first, they treated me politely, making offers and trying to coax me into revealing the secrets of various factions. But when persuasion failed, his eyes opened, shadowed with memory. They turned to threats and torture. Yeo-Woon's throat tightened. His thoughts whispered bitterly. I saw it when grandfather returned, the scars of torture all over his body. Cheon Yeo's hands trembled slightly as he clasped them together, his voice breaking at the edges. It was this old man's foolish delusion. I believed that if I just endured, I could gain everything. But the two of us who were held there, tortured for nearly 10 years, eventually succumbed to their hypnosis. His jaw clenched, eyes narrowing with bitter shame. In that time, their hypnosis techniques had surpassed even the power of the Muscle Change Classic. Still trembling, Cheon Yeo continued, voice now almost a whisper. Shamefully, I have no memory of the time I was under hypnosis. But there was no order to die. They had judged that they'd completely turned this old man into a member of the Ghost Iron and began using me in earnest for their grand plan. Each time, I tried to break free of the hypnosis briefly with the Muscle Change Classic to figure out their objectives. But there were so many masters within their lair. I couldn't freely use it. Sometimes it took a month to regain my senses, sometimes even longer, my memory scattered like fragments, always in confusion. Cheon Yeo's voice grew quieter. To make matters worse, he said slowly, the hypnosis and the bugs were adapting, even to the energy of the Muscle Change Classic. It must have been the same for Grand Master Gujung. Yeo-Woon's eyes narrowed as he asked softly, did you discover anything? Cheon Yeo closed his eyes and shook his head, his expression one of bitter defeat. They were truly remarkable. They used simplified Chinese characters as a code, but I couldn't understand more than half of it. I couldn't obtain any crucial information. Yeo-Woon's face hardened as a thought struck him. Could it be simplified Chinese? Come to think of it, the Book of Divine Techniques they were after was also written in simplified Chinese. He clenched his fist. What a shame. If I had brought that book, we could have deciphered it. But, in grandfather's situation, that would have been impossible. Cheon Yeo nodded faintly. In the end, all I could do was transcribe those characters whenever the hypnosis wore off. Yeo-Woon's eyes widened, stunned. Is that really true? Yes, Cheon Yeo replied, his voice steady but weary. The problem was smuggling out what I had transcribed. After a long wait, an opportunity came. This old man was deployed to obtain the dragon turtle's core. Fortunately, I regained my consciousness briefly while in Hebei province and managed to hide it without them noticing. Though my memory isn't complete, that code was probably left by their ancestor. Yeo-Woon's breath caught in his throat, his mind racing. If that's true, if it's really a record left by the Blade God, we might be able to learn his true purpose. Cheon Yeo then continued, his tone low and deliberate. Later, while facing the dragon turtle, the hypnosis temporarily wore off again. I entrusted my identity plaque to a young man from the North Sea Ice Palace and asked him for help. Cheon Yeo gave a faint smile, his tired eyes softening as he looked at Yeo-Un. Who would have thought that by some miracle, you would be the one to rescue this old man? I believe this miracle is surely due to the grace of the heavenly demon ancestor. He paused, his words trailing into silence. Then his gaze sharpened as he asked, and you wanted to know about the cores of the 5 spirits? Yeo-Woon's expression grew serious. I was curious why you said the cores must never fall into their hands. Cheon Yeo slowly lifted his head, his voice heavy. It's hard to believe, but if what they said is true. He let the words hang, then added with a grave tone. Eternal life. Immortality. They claimed the cores would allow one to enjoy eternal life itself. Cheon Yeo paused, his words fading into silence. Then his gaze sharpened as he asked, and you were asking about the core of the 5 spirits, weren't you? Yeo-Woon's expression turned solemn. I was curious why you said the cores must not fall into their hands. Cheon Yeo slowly lifted his head, his tone heavy. It's hard to believe, but if what they said is true, eternal life and immortality. He let the words linger in the air before continuing gravely. Eternal life. Immortality. They claimed the cores would grant one eternal life itself. The Grand Guardian beside them frowned and asked, Eternal life and immortality? My lord, are you saying that's even possible? Cheon Yeo-Woon replied calmly. If what they said is true, then once they gather all the cores of the 5 spirits, it is possible. Yeo-Woon's eyes narrowed as his mind raced. That's no different from being ageless and undying. If that's true, it explains why they're so obsessed with the cores. Then his expression stiffened as a memory flashed before him. The vision I saw when the Nano system entered self-repair mode. At that time, didn't it say that the one called the Ultimate Blade God had lived for nearly 1,000 years? If the clan leader is truly that Blade God, then he really did achieve eternal life. In the original history, he must have been the one who obtained the cores of the 5 spirit beasts. But in this timeline, I obtained them first. He clenched his fist slightly. But that wasn't something I intended. It started with the spiritual power of the Moose, then the fire Cheon of the Imperial Tomb, and finally, the Dragon Turtle of the Northern Sea. The Great Ping's spiritual power within the 5 cold ice wall. That too was something I gained purely by coincidence. Yeo-Un looked down at his outstretched hand, his eyes dim with thought, almost as if it were all predetermined. He added inwardly, if I were to gain the energy core of the White Tiger, as grandfather said, would I truly attain eternal life and immortality? I've never even desired that. It's absurd. Cheon Yeo-Woon broke the silence. Perhaps it's a good thing after all. The room fell quiet, the tension heavy. He continued slowly. If the clan leader of the 6 Ultimate Blade sect were to obtain eternal life, then surely the entire martial world would have fallen into his hands. He sighed. But the fact that you've already taken 3 of the cores, that's truly fortunate. Yeo-Un smiled faintly to himself. 4, actually, but it's better I don't mention that yet. Cheon Yeo-Woon's expression hardened. But the clan leader too must have obtained the Great Ping's core at Patala Palace. Yeo-Un's eyes widened slightly. Humph, the Great Pung? Then realization struck him. So another Great Pung existed elsewhere. Since the divine relic of the North Sea Ice Palace is ancient, that's possible. Cheon Yeo-Woon closed his eyes, worried faintly in his voice. If that man has truly obtained the core of the Great Pung, then his next target will surely be the last remaining core, the White Tiger. Even though you've already acquired 3 cores, you must not let your guard down. Cheon Yeo-Woon's gaze turned distant as he recalled the past. It happened the first time I faced him inside the lair of the Blade God's 6 martial clan, he said slowly. Under the pretext of testing the Iron Trial stage, that man single-handedly fought 20 martial masters who were all under hypnosis. He continued, at that time, this old man had already freed himself from the hypnosis by circulating the reversal tendon art. I thought it was the perfect opportunity, and I attacked with all my might. His voice grew heavy. However, the result was shocking. 2 supreme masters and 18 superior masters attacked together, yet they couldn't withstand even a single strike from him. Cheon Yeo-Woon lowered his gaze, his tone grave. Yeo-Un, the Blade Lord is truly a monster. He clasped his hands together. If he manages to acquire more than 2 cores, then even with 3 in your possession, the battle will still be grueling. He looked up firmly. You must obtain the core of the White Tiger before he does. If that happens, even the Blade Lord may not be able to stand against you. His eyes narrowed as he recalled further. This old man witnessed the technique he unleashed with my own eyes. It was a blade art that transcended the limits of the human body itself. You've seen the rubbings of the heavenly demon sword art in the teaching hall, haven't you? The only technique that can stand against the Blade God's art is that one, left behind by our founder. Cheon Yeo-Woon then smiled faintly, lifting his chin. Fortunately, before infiltrating the 6 Ultimate Blade sect, I managed to recreate the energy circulation method of the heavenly demon sword art. It allows one to unleash at least 70% of its full power. He straightened, his tone resolute. We must not delay any longer. Starting today, I shall personally teach you the energy circulation method. Yeo-Un's face turned pale, sweat dripping down his temples. Cheon Yeo-Woon then continued. With your talent, you'll be able to fully revive the lost heavenly demon sword art. Yeo-Un slowly closed his eyes, raising a hand to stop him. Grandfather, forgive me, but I've already discovered the energy method left by our founder on the Azure Jade Pole and completed the heavenly demon sword art. Cheon Niji froze, his eyes widening in disbelief. What? He blinked rapidly, then laughed in amazement. Amazing, even for my own grandson. This is unbelievable. Yeo-Un said nothing, only thinking to himself. If I told him that I also created a martial art combining the heavenly demon sword art and the extreme art of the blade god, he might just faint. 5 days later, Dan Baekhyun's voice called out, "Master, can't you stay a little longer before you leave?" Yeo-Un turned back to see his disciples and said calmly, "Don't say things you don't mean." Dan Baekhyun frowned. "How could you think that? There's still so much I want to learn." Yeo-Un folded his arms. "I've already taught you everything I can. You've received all the formulas of the profound cold ice art. I'll check later to see whether you've mastered them properly." Dan Baekhyun blinked in surprise. "What? You'll check?" Yeo-Un's eyes flared red as he said fiercely, "You are my first disciple. Did you really think I'd just let it slide? I'll assign 2 members of the 6 Swords unit to stay here, and make sure you don't slack off in your training." Dan Baekhyun quickly bowed his head. "I won't disappoint you." The council elder with glasses glanced at him quietly, thinking, this kid not only lacks basic talent, but despite being born into a martial family, he has little interest in martial arts. The elder glanced slightly at Yeo-Un and said, "If we think about the future of the Northern Sea Ice Palace, the rightful successor should be Dan Jushin. To be honest, Dan Baekhyun has just been luckier, that's all." Yeo-Un stepped aboard the ship, then turned back to them with a faint smile. "We'll be leaving now. Don't neglect your training." Dan Baekhyun smiled bitterly, sighing as he replied, "Yes, master." Hyo-bong then walked up to Yeo-Un with a grin. "My lord, since you've already taken them under your command, wouldn't it be better to rename the Northern Sea Ice Palace? Something like Heavenly Demon Cult, Northern Branch." Haha, sounds badass, doesn't it? Before he could finish, a heavy hand smacked the back of his head. Hyo-bong yelped, clutching his skull. "My head's not a drum for you to pound on." Ho Sang-hwa put her hands on her hips, glaring at him. "Everything else was fine, but please, just learn to keep that mouth shut." "Hu-bong." Hyo-bong grumbled, rubbing his head. "Yes, yes." Then he glanced toward Dan Jushin's group. Dan Jushin only looked back at him briefly before turning away in silence. Meanwhile, Murong Kong and strategist Jae-gao stood quietly at the far edge of the ship, observing. Moang Yu glanced at Jae-gao and sent a voice transmission. "Strategist, what's going to happen to us now?" She replied calmly, "Don't be too anxious, young Master Moyang." Her eyes shifted toward Yeo-Un, who was speaking with Baek Gi. "Since they've taken us as hostages, they won't harm us easily." Moyang Yu followed her gaze and frowned slightly. "That cold-blooded man." Strategist Jae-gao clenched her fist, eyes hard. "They're holding us hostage as part of the deal to get the Martial Alliance to send troops, so they won't openly clash with the Alliance yet. Prioritizing the elimination of the Blade God's 6 Martial clan works in their favor too." Moang Yu shot a look at her. "Strategist Jae-gao, if we get the chance, we have to escape. That cold-blooded man will cut off arms or kill anyone who displeases him. We could end up like them." Jaegal's expression turned grim. "Do you really think we can escape?" Moang Yu refused to relent. "We can't give up. Even if the heavens collapse, there's always a way out. When the chance comes, we must try." Suddenly Baek Gi stepped forward. "Young Master Moyang." Moang Yu startled. "What is it?" Baek Gi replied. "The cult leader is summoning you." Moang Yu protested, worried and sweating, insisting he'd behaved himself, but Jae-gao only sighed, thinking to herself at his nerve for planning to flee. Baek Gi returned to the cult leader. "I've brought young Master Moyang." Yeo-Un regarded Moyang Yu with cold curiosity. "I heard the Moyang clan resides in Liaoning province. You must be familiar with its geography, yes?" Moyang Yu swallowed and answered, "Yes, that's correct." His mind raced. Why was Yeo-Un asking about geography? Don't tell me he's planning to go after the Moyang clan, who rule Liaoning. Yeo-Un's gaze sharpened. "Once we arrive in Liaoning, you will guide the way to Changbai Mountain." The scene shifts to the 10,000 Mountains, headquarters of the heavenly demonic cult. Inside the Supreme Elder's training chamber, Siab Ming approached Cheon Yeo-Jong and reported his findings. Yeo-Jong's eyes narrowed. "He has found my father?" Siab Ming nodded. "That's not all. The cult leader has also brought the Northern Sea Ice Palace under our cult's rule. Yuzhang's expression changed instantly. What? He stood in disbelief. Changing the state religion, making the imperial capital, Kaifeng, our territory, and now even absorbing the Northern Sea Ice Palace under our banner. Xiao Ming placed a hand over his chest proudly. It was this humble one who saw his potential from the beginning and accepted him as a disciple. He chuckled lightly. A true blessing for our cult. Yuzhang smiled faintly, his gaze distant. Weiyan, your child has far surpassed me. Then he turned to Xiao Ming. A joyous day indeed, right, Guardian? Without warning, Yuzhang flew down from the platform and said, Since you've brought such good news, how about sharing a drink with me? Of course, Xiao Ming began. But before he could finish, Yuzhang's hand shot forward in a flash, aiming for his neck. Xiao Ming barely dodged, the attack slicing through the wall with a thunderous crack. Yuzhang burst through the shattered wall, his aura flaring as he landed outside. Xiao Ming peered through the hole, alarmed. Supreme Elder, what's wrong? Yuzhang's sharp gaze swept across the surroundings. For a moment, I could have sworn someone was eavesdropping on our conversation. Xiao Ming's eyes widened. Here, inside the Supreme Elder's hall, he added, This is the most heavily guarded chamber in the entire cult. There's no way anyone could approach undetected, especially by someone like you, one of the 5 great masters. Yuzhang turned his head slightly. It seems I was mistaken. A brief pause followed before he muttered, Even if my life force is weakened, to think I could make such an error. He then said calmly, Let's head inside. Xiao Ming smiled faintly and replied, As you wish. At the 10,000 mountains, on the peak of Mount Dian, a shadowy figure began to materialize, his form flickering like blue holographic particles. The man clutched his bleeding side and gritted his teeth. There's no way he could have seen me with those eyes, and yet he sensed me. Blood dripped from his fingers as he cursed under his breath. Damn it! He looked into the distance, eyes filled with dread. That monster defies all reason. Suddenly, the small bag on his lap began to emit smoke. Noticing it, he quickly grabbed it, eyes widening. Damn it! In one swift motion, he pulled out a blue disc that was now releasing thick smoke and hurled it into the air. The disc exploded with a loud bang, as glowing particles scattered in all directions. In the next instant, a massive black hole formed at the center of the explosion, sucking in everything nearby with terrifying force. Moments later, it began to shrink, until it vanished completely. Cheon Yeo-Woon exhaled shakily, relief washing over him. A little slower, and I would have been pulled right into that spatial distortion. He clutched the back of his head, cursing again. Damn it, to lose a whole time pack like that. Reaching into his bag, he pulled out another device. That means I've only got 2 left now, huh? He took a deep breath, his tone grim. There's no way I can walk back to the cult from here. If I move carelessly, I'll get detected. Suddenly, his expression changed, eyes widening in alarm. He clicks his tongue in annoyance as he said, Did they already pick up my trail? He checked his smartwatch, panic flashing in his eyes. Why are they so fast? Cursing inwardly, he rushed to input new coordinates on his device. The original plans completely gone to hell. As the device activated, a bright blue light engulfed him. In the next instant, Cheon Yeo-Woon vanished from sight, leaping through time and space in a blinding flash. Scene shifts to the headquarters of the Martial Artists Alliance. For a long time, the balance between the 3 great powers and the duties each upheld had kept the Alliance's High Council and commanding officers from gathering together. Ever since the rise of the Blade God 6 martial clan, such meetings had become even rarer. But today, even those who had skipped the Martial World Non-Aggression Treaty assembly appeared. For the first time in ages, the Great Council Hall was filled. At the head seat sat the Martial Alliance leader, North Justice Blade, Yimik. In front of him stood the first strategist, Yu-Beam Reed, dressed in white. Beside him was the first master, master of the Shangxi Sword Sect, Maguchon, robed in red. At the far end sat the second master, abbot of Shaolin, Gakyan. To his right, the man in green robes, 13th master, patriarch of the Jigul clan, Jigul Yeo. Next to him, dressed in white, was the 14th master, Taoist master of the Zhongnan sect, Jiaqiang. The man in blue robes, 17th master, lord of the Habuk Peng clan, Peng Yu. And the one in brown, 18th master, lord of the Jinju-Yun clan, Yeo-Un. Alongside them were the captains of each combat unit under the Martial Alliance's command. The only absentees, 4 masters and 2 unit commanders. The 7th master, Muvon Kong, still hadn't returned from the North Sea expedition. The 15th master, Huang Bonong, had perished in the North Sea expedition. The 3rd master, Nambung Kyung, was slain in Jinjiang. And the 9th master, one Macean of the Boda sect, was killed in Jiangsu during a surprise attack by the Blade God's 6 martial clan. Among the absentees were Yun Buso, commander of the North Justice Blade Squad, currently in closed-door training, and Kong Soa, commander of the Black Shadow Unit, who fell in the Northern Sea. A man in black stroked his beard quietly, thinking, the atmosphere feels grim. To issue an emergency summons, what on earth happened? Yimik then rose from his seat, clapped his hands, and said firmly, "First, I thank you all for answering the emergency call. We have little time, so let's proceed straight to the main matter." He turned toward the 2 guards at the door. "Bring him in." Moments later, a man in purple robes entered the hall with composed steps. One of the Alliance Masters stood in surprise. The Black Shadow Unit's vice captain, Make Waijong? Wasn't he deployed to the Northern Sea with Commander Kong? Then why is he here? The man bowed slightly, cupping his hands in respect. "Honored heroes who lead our alliance. I, Make Mo, the new commander of the Black Shadow Unit, greet you." The hall stirred. New commander? The abbot of Shaolin, Gak Yun, turned sharply to the alliance leader. "What is the meaning of this?" Yimik raised a hand, steadying the room. "Let's hear Commander Make's report first." Make Mo stepped forward, voice tense with urgency. "I'll get straight to the point. We've discovered the hidden headquarters of the Blade God's 6 martial clan." Jigul Yong shot up from his seat, eyes wide. "What? The Blade God's 6 martial clan's base?" Pengyu also stood abruptly, his gaze fixed on Make Mo as he circled the table. "Where is it? Jiangsu or Zhejiang?" Make Mo stopped, turned, and stepped forward. With a sharp motion, he pointed down at the map. "It's right here." His finger landed on Huangshan. In Huangshan, Hangzhou, Zhejiang province. Pengyu froze, a bead of sweat running down his face. Huangshan, a breathtaking mountain surrounded by steep, jagged peaks. A place both perilous and perfect for hiding a base. Indeed, a fitting location to establish and conceal a stronghold. One of the beggar clan heads then spoke up. "But how did Commander Make discover their hideout was there? Ever since we lost Jiangsu and Zhejiang to the Blade God's 6 martial clan, even our guild members who so much as stepped into Zhejiang were slaughtered without mercy." Make Mo bowed slightly, speaking with measured calm. "Considering even one of the 3 great intelligence networks of the Orthodox factions suffered such losses, your doubts are understandable, Master." He then raised his head. "However, please take a look at this first." Make Mo glanced toward the alliance leader. Yimik nodded. "Open it." At his command, the 2 men at the gate pushed open the large doors. Moments later, several attendants rolled in a massive cart draped in heavy cloth. With one swift motion, a man pulled the cloth away. Jia Qiang and Ian Yongin both shot to their feet, eyes wide in shock, mouths agape. Even the masters from other sects widened their eyes in shock. "What's that?" they exclaimed. Make Mo stepped forward and declared, "That is the dragon turtle." Several masters moved closer, examining the massive head laid before them. "That's the dragon turtle's head? It truly resembles a dragon, just as the legends described." One murmured in disbelief. The beggar clan head then noticed something else. Moments later, another group entered, pushing a smaller cart covered in cloth. They stopped right before the council. "There seems to be something else," another master said cautiously. At a gesture, one of the men pulled the cloth away. Everyone froze. "What in the world is this?" someone gasped. Inside the cart lay several rotting corpses, maggots crawling across their decayed flesh. The stench filled the whole area. The beggar clan head covered his face with one hand and demanded, "Commander Make, these corpses, what are they doing here?" Make Mo replied firmly, "These men, one of them was a master of the Blade God's 6 martial clan, and the rest were his followers." Silence swept through the whole area. The beggar clan head stepped forward again, placing his hand on one of the corpses' necks. There's a way to identify members of the Blade God's 6 martial clan, he muttered. He struck several points along the corpse's body, then froze. They would deliberately destroy the meridians of their dead to prevent others from learning their internal arts. If such marks are present, that alone confirms who they are. He stepped back slowly, eyes wide with realization. Then he turned to the rest of the council. You are correct, he said gravely. It is indeed them. The alliance leader, Yimik, still seated, raised his hand and said calmly, If everyone has finished verifying, please take your seats. The hall fell silent as the masters returned to their places. Yimik then stood, his heavy robes swaying as he stepped forward. His voice echoed with solemn weight. As everyone has seen, he began, what lies before us is the severed head of the dragon turtle from the Northern Sea, and the corpses of the Blade God's 6 martial clan's disciples. The atmosphere grew tense. Yimik continued, his tone sharpening. Commander Make and the Black Shadow Division pursued the retreating Blade God's 6 martial clan forces from the Northern Sea. In doing so, they uncovered their hidden base and successfully reclaimed the dragon turtle's head. One of the masters in white robes, Master Changsu, narrowed his eyes and spoke. The evidence is undeniable. However, one question remains. He folded his arms, his gaze fixed on Makemo. I mean no offense to Commander Make's martial prowess, but if even our spies could not infiltrate Jujong, how did you manage to locate their headquarters? Makemo bowed respectfully. Your doubt is understandable, Master Changsu. Had they still possessed their full strength, I, too, would not have returned alive. Changsu's eyes sharpened. What do you mean by that? Makemo then recalled the scene, his expression grave. When I discovered their base at Huangshan, during my covert pursuit, a significant portion of their forces were absent. At their current strength, the Alliance could easily overwhelm them with a full-scale assault. The beggar clan had leaned forward, brows furrowed. Then, the reason the Alliance leader issued an emergency summons was... Yimik turned his gaze toward the strategist seated beside him. Strategist Yu-Bm Reed. Yu-Bm Reed rose smoothly, adjusting his white sleeves. This intelligence, he said, comes from one of our spies embedded within the Demonic Alliance's territory. He paused briefly before continuing. The Blade Lord, current leader of the Blade God 6 martial clan, has taken part of his forces and headed west, toward Napsao, in Tibet. Yu-Bm Reed then continued, his tone grave. And as some of the masters here may already know, another detachment of their forces was sent north, in pursuit of the dragon turtle. At those words, Pingyu slammed his hand on the table, his voice booming through the hall. Then the deployment of our expeditionary force to the Northern Sea was because... Yu-Bm Reed's expression darkened, his voice deepening with weight. After consolidating all gathered intelligence, he said slowly, I have come to a realization. Their ambition is not limited to conquering the Central Plains. The entire hall fell silent. He looked around at the assembled masters, each of their faces tense. The Blade God 6 martial clan seeks to slay the sacred beasts themselves, those dwelling within the Imperial Palace, the one in the Northern Sea, and even the sacred beast in Napsao. If you enjoyed the video, remember to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode. See you next time.